Welcome to our presentation on Brazil. The following presentation will discuss the research found in Brazil and what it takes to open up a new facility in this country, by Olga, Michelle, Jerica, Brianna, and Katie, in completion for globalization and diversity. The next important demographic is literacy rate and education. The literacy rate and education demographic have also been improving at a steady rate since the early 2000s. Based on the United Nations Human Development Report, the literacy rate is currently at 92%. This is a good increase that shows more and more people are becoming educated throughout the country. Understanding the literacy rate is a great segue into learning about the education part of demographics. Some countries put a greater emphasis on education than others. Education and the average amount of schooling has been increasing in Brazil. Currently, the average amount of schooling is about 15 years. This is an improvement compared to what schooling used to be. The style of schooling system is similar to the United States, meaning there is elementary, high school, and then college if the student chooses to further their education. However, throughout the country, there is a large amount of children not attending school. Schooling is not as enforced in Brazil compared to other countries. But more people are deciding to further their education than ever before. Along with that, more women are also choosing to further their education. Human resources should have an understanding of the average levels of education in Brazil to help understand their workforce and the types of people who might be applying for the jobs. The next demographic is the gross national income of the country. Right now, Brazil is the 9th largest economy in the world, which means they are a very big player. Companies should have an understanding of what the current economic state of the country is before opening a facility. Knowing about gross national income and the economy could especially be important depending on what type of company is opening. The United Nations Human Development Report shows that the gross national income has been increasing since the 1970s. Currently, the gross national income is about $14,000 per capita. This means it is the current average income for people in the country. Human resources and managers should know what the income per capita is because it shows how well the country is doing economically. This is important for knowing what type of pay the company will be giving out and what employees will be expecting. Workforce availability is the final demographic. Currently, Brazil's workforce availability is 64%. This statistic shows how many people are either working or searching for work within the country. This means more than half the population are involved in the job market somehow. However, 12.5% of the population are still unemployed. Human resources and the company should know about workforce availability to get an idea of how the job market works in Brazil. A few conclusions to note about demographics. Economic and political unrest have shaped demographics throughout the past few years. A company should know about these issues and about basic demographics before opening a new facility. The research will help with understanding what the country is like, what helps shape the country, and what types of people are going to be potentially working in the new workforce. That is all for demographics. Next, there will be discussion on the culture of Brazil.
Hi everyone, my name is Brianna and today I'm going to be talking about the culture between Brazil versus the US. As we become HR professionals or global leaders, we must learn more about culture outside of the US. This is referred to being culturally intelligent and can help with communication, business, and relationship building. Through my research, I noticed there were far more differences than similarities, except for a few factors. Diversity. Brazil has European, Japanese, African, and indigenous influences. The US, as a nation of immigrants, is full of many different people that have reinforced, mixed, and shaped history and culture. Communication. In Brazil, communication is indirect, high context, and formal, and this is for everyday use and during business settings. This is almost the complete opposite from the US, as we value our communication to be both direct and indirect, low context, and informal. Indirect communication is common in Brazil because it is considered very rude when someone is too direct. This is usually used when someone is asking for something or a favor. Direct is more of a demand rather than a request and is usually normalized in the US with deadlines, guidelines, or in a business setting. High context conversations are anything more than words. This could be body language, facial expressions, tones, or settings. The US tends to use more low context to directly explain and avoid miscommunication. Formal titles are used at all times in Brazil unless a relationship has been formed. As a sign of respect, every professional, elder, or stranger will be referred to as Miss or Mr. The US is much more lenient with formal titles after reaching a certain age. Individualism. According to the Hofstede Insights, Brazil was ranked at a 38 in individualism versus the US at 91. Individualism is when a person looks after only themselves and their immediate family. This means loyalty is an important factor as they protect their family and they believe that family helps family. As for the US, they look to family and superiors in the workforce for guidance or help, but not always. However, due to the lack of relationship building, this at times means Americans mostly look after themselves and tend to be private and self-reliant, according to GlobeSmart. Relationships. In Brazil, relationships are extremely important. Before doing any kind of business or project, there must be a relationship formed. This must also be a personal relationship that discusses family and health before any serious business. As they believe a strong personal relationship takes time and patience, if one member feels like they are being rushed into a relationship, it will seem unvalued and insincere. Face-to-face interactions are also preferred over phone check-ins to be more personal. Building a personal relationship with the right contacts in business will also provide more opportunities. Being humble is also common. Individual accomplishments are not usually spoken about unless asked. As their relationship with their family is part of the culture norm, Brazilians believe individual credibility is tied to a family background and social status, which could affect business settings. For the US, most relationships in business or projects are short-term, and it is common to self-promote. Although relationships are short, reliability is high, highly valued, but not usually personal. Work life. Family is more important than work in Brazil. There is plenty of pride and loyalty in family, which is commonly practiced in the workforce. This means management teams will also support their employees in family matters and develop personal relationships with each immediate family member. The US is more career-driven, and family relationships are considered less essential in the workplace. As discussed, family communication and relationship building are all important factors in Brazil. Although there are many differences compared to the US, we can appreciate the diversity and learn to become more culturally intelligent. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Michelle Salas and I will be talking about the employment law differences between the United States and Brazil. I was able to narrow it down to two. However, something that helped me personally is looking at what was similar between the countries before going through the list on what the countries do differently in terms of employment laws. Laws that they have similar in both the US and Brazil are that there is a maximum number of days worked per week, no restrictions on weekly pay, and as well as no restrictions on overtime work. The maximum number of days that can be worked per week is 6 days legally before the employees have to take a day off, and there's also no restrictions on weekly holidays. So if there's a Brazilian holiday and a US recognized holiday, then employees will get those holidays off. However, the two employment laws that stood out the most is the fixed term contract law and the minimum wage laws. Fixed term contract law in Brazil means that there cannot be contracts for permanent positions. It is only for seasonal temporary work. The longest it can go for seasonal work is 24 months. After that, it does become illegal in Brazil. An example of this would be hiring a contractor to redo an office building or hiring employees during a busy season and letting them go after the season is done. The US does not have this law, but most states are at-will employment. At-will employment just means that companies can let you go at any time. There's no law that gives employees a heads up before getting fired. And when opening business operations in Brazil, human resource managers do need to know the fixed-term contract law in order to not get sued or fined for keeping an employee longer than the contract started as well. The second employment law that stood out to me between the differences of the United States and Brazil is the differences in minimum wage. It is honestly mind-boggling to me how little Brazilian worker makes compared to what an American worker makes in the United States. What the minimum wage average for a Brazilian worker is honestly almost like one paycheck for 1 week for an American worker, if that, depending on the role and all that fun stuff. It's pretty crazy to know that with the difference in minimum wages, the average minimum wage by Brazilian workers is about $396 per month, whereas an American worker is about $2,320 per month, all depending on where they're currently working at. It can be seen, however, as a cost saving to our American company to do business in Brazil, mostly because we can afford to hire about 5 to 6 more employees for the price of one in the United States. An American company does have to decide whether to save money by doing the minimum wage in the foreign country they expand to or giving more than necessary to the employees. Honestly, from a human resources management standpoint, it might be better to get about maybe 2 to 3 Brazilian workers for that price and divide it equally between them versus lowballing 5 to 6 employees. Even though it might not seem like lowballing, it's honestly going to feel like a little bit of a better company over there, and it's going to have more positive word of mouth between workers and their Brazilian families, friends, on why they should go ahead and work for this American company versus this Brazilian company. And honestly, that's the best thing to have. Word of mouth does get better workers into the companies. However, something that did stood out to me the most was that despite the low minimum wage, there is a benefit to Brazilian workers. And that benefit is that it is mandatory to give them a 13-month pay or a Christmas bonus when doing business in Brazil. It is essentially an extra salary payment per year, and it's part of the minimum benefits that must be granted by all employers in Brazil. This is something that is definitely not done in the United States as a minimum benefit and depends on each individual company. I know that there's companies that my parents have worked for that they definitely had a Christmas bonus, and they have quarterly bonuses as well if their stores are doing good. However, I know the companies I have worked for, there's no such thing as Christmas bonuses in that essence where it's money related. It's more of experiences. I know personally at Disney we don't have Christmas bonuses in my role. However, they do give out Christmas tickets so that we can go ahead and bring families in to Disney during one of the most magical times of the year. And however, despite these differences, it's definitely important for the United States company to go ahead and make sure that they do have that 13-month or Christmas bonus into contracts with permanent workers, just to make sure that they won't get sued or be liable for anything bad, and it would work out fine if they went that route.
Hello, my name is Jirka Shepica, and I will be talking about the differences in human resource management between Brazil and the United States. The first difference is the overall perspective of human resource management. Brazil has more of a micro perspective in the grand scheme of things, while the United States has more of a macro perspective. The United States often forms their internal strategies by looking from the outside in. This means that they look at external factors such as the state of the economy, general business trends, or changing government policies when forming their internal strategies. On the other hand, Brazil often looks only internally to form the same kind of strategies, ignoring those external factors. Employee relations and human resource management in Brazil do not overlap because the former is seen in a macro perspective while the latter is seen in more of a micro perspective. As an example, back in 2015, Brazil was going through an economic crisis. Their human resource managers were caught off guard by it because they were not paying attention to the external factors, and they were unprepared for the layoffs that had to follow. Labor market institutions, such as trade unions, government agencies involved in labor supervision, or even public administration agencies external to the organization, are mostly ignored by human resource managers as a source of data, or even as potential mediators on these issues. The implication of this difference is that when the United States is opening up facilities in Brazil, they need to coach their human resource managers to be extra attentive to those external factors. Doing so could give them a strategic edge over the companies who are only looking internally. The second difference is the contrast of employment laws in Brazil as compared to the United States. These laws give a drastic difference in how employees are hired and retained between the two countries. Brazil has stricter employment contract laws, shorter shift requirements for certain lines of business, set holiday time, and required bonuses. This gives human resource managers in Brazil less flexibility to work strategically than they would have in the United States, especially in terms of budget. There are certain aspects that have to be factored in according to the government, so human resources need to get creative with their budget cuts and while forming strategies. Also, because of the contract laws in Brazil, human resources needs to be extra selective when hiring staff, as they cannot just let them go if they prove to not be good employees. The employment laws in Brazil give human resource managers less flexibility when making certain decisions than they would have in the United States, so they must adjust to run their department strategically and effectively while still adhering to the laws. The third and final difference we want to cover between human resource management in Brazil and the United States is the contrast in development and education. The United States has had a clear focus on personnel development, especially recently. The United States has a workforce advisory board dedicated to the comprehensive employee growth within organizations and making sure Americans have the skills necessary for successful employment. Also, larger organizations who are established in the United States, such as the Walt Disney Company, have made education a priority with programs set up to fund employees further in their education and personal development. Human resources, of course, plays a major role in carrying out these development-focused programs. Brazil has not always had the same kind of focus on employee development, but they are slowly making progress to make it more of a priority. There is still the need, though, for a more educated workforce, despite Brazil's recent economic growth. Although large Brazilian companies increasingly invest in training and development, most companies still have not adopted a culture of innovation and training. To achieve sustained competitiveness, this has to become a norm among Brazilian organizations. This is especially true with the recent transition from a service-oriented workforce and an increase in technology in the workforce. There needs to be more invested into the knowledge management process and technology knowledge in general. There is also a need for the human resource departments in Brazil to make training and development a main concern. Brazil still has progress to make in cultivating a more educated and developed workforce, so it is vital for international organizations to form clear strategies that develop their employees in Brazil to create a more educated and stronger workforce overall.
Hello, my name is Olga Glazer, and I'll be talking about the SWOT analysis. We're starting with strength. With an estimated population of over 214 million people, Brazil presents a number of opportunities for foreign investors to do business in the country. Brazil has the fifth largest population and a fast growing middle class, which means there's a huge consumer market. In addition, Brazil is part of the Southern Common Market, which means companies have easy access to other countries in the region and allow them to take advantage of trade agreement. This means that number one, there is a free movement of goods and services through the removal of custom duties and non-tariff restrictions. And number two, cooperation in international economic forums. And number three, there is a integrated legislation to make it easier for business and people operating across member countries. Next, we'll be looking at weaknesses. This is developing countries, so there is a list of weaknesses when it comes to doing business in Brazil. Some of those concerns are lots of taxes, there's corruption, unfair competition. Most will not follow the rules and have a cheaper price than you, not because you have more profits, but because you do the right thing and they don't. Have unstable economy, socialist thinking, and also you will never understand the law or how the right way of proceeding with the government demands. Not even if you pay someone who's supposed to know, they can't be 100%. Okay, now let's look at opportunity. In recent times, Brazilian companies and individuals have been seeking alternative source of energy, and international experts are now looking towards Brazil as a great place to bring the market what is desired. Together with a market-driven demand for renewable energy source, investors and suppliers see this sector as a key growth area of Brazil. In fact, according to Brazilian Energy Research Office, renewable energy source, including wind power, solar, are expected to reach almost 61 kilowatts in capacity by 2027. Um, Once upon a time, smartphones was just for fun. These times are over. Today, smartphones provide a tremendous platform to test and trial new ideas, programs, and applications. As the middle class in Brazil grows, and the expectations of smarter users increase daily, the market becomes larger. Shed some light on the opportunities for experts and companies involved in the mobile phone application developments. The opportunities are feasible in the sectors like real estate and ride shares are some of the examples. Now, lastly is threats. Despite an attractive economy and expanding a consumer market, starting a business in Brazil is not easy. Major obstacles include high tax rates and swollen bureaucracy. It takes an average of 13 procedures and 119 days of work just to start a business. Another consideration is finding the right partner. In majority of cases, it is almost impossible to start a business in Brazil without an experienced Brazilian partner who speaks the language and understands the culture. Brazilians have a tradition of changing jobs frequently, especially these days with shortage of professionals and specialized workers. This stems from a tradition in which a successful career is more about money than loyalty to the company or brand. Many are exploited, underpaid, and working in difficult conditions. Because of the many abuses against the workers, labor laws in Brazil are heavily skewed towards protecting employees. While positive in theory, in practice, this can create complications. Even when an employee gives just cause to be fired, it is often very difficult to dismiss them. Moreover, employees can and actually do often sue employers for wrongful termination. In fact, Brazil has one of the highest number of labor claims in the world.